Hey guys and girls, Bored now back with you on this video. I'm going to be talking about episode 1 of The Curse, and the episode is called Land of Enchantment. Full spoilers from the start of this review. So this is the new Showtime A24 indie comedy series. So it stars Emma Stone, and it also stars Nathan Fielder in the leads, and it stars and is co-created by Benny Safdie of the Safdie brothers. He has a supporting role as like the producer of this, almost playing like a version of himself, or I guess in a way like a parody of himself. So the setup for the show is then Stone's character and Fielder's character are recently married, and they're currently trying to buy up new properties in Mexico, a small Mexican city, where they're looking to make a lot of money off the property in a poorer neighborhood, but they're doing this under the guise of bringing wealth to the community and bringing prosperity. They have a coffee chain which they have started up there, which is like an organic coffee chain, and that they're kind of trying to promote how they're bringing new jobs to the area with that. And the whole vibe is that it's one of these very kind of preachy, lefty, like very kind of earthy like chains, which is perhaps all for appearances, but in reality there's something a little bit like unsincere about it. But they're being followed around by a documentary crew, and Safdie plays like the producer of that, a very sleazy producer who is always trying to manipulate things, and a real hack, like just doing everything he can to like try and force something into like a dramatic scene instead of like letting things play out naturally. So very like cynical, sinister character in this show, and the drama follows these two characters, Whitney and Asher, as they're going through their sort of early stages of marriage, and they're having real problems. And the first episode focuses on a blunder by Asher when they're being interviewed by a local reporter, and the reporter brings up that Whitney's parents have a reputation for really screwing over the locals because they own like properties, and they have a bad reputation for screwing people over and like being almost like really like shark like landlords, tenants, whatever you want to say. But that leads to a very awkward exchange where Asher says something that he shouldn't done. He gets very defensive and like tries to turn the tables on the reporter, but it makes him look very malicious at the same time and too defensive. So the Emma Stone character Whitney is insisting that he goes to apologise, and he gets a few minutes with the reporter so he can calm things down and try and talk her out of like publishing what was filmed. And at the same time they're doing all these different things around town to try and make themselves look good and sincere. Now the reason it's called The Curse is because halfway through the episode Benny Safdie's character suggests then, as a bit of a stunt, like Asher gives money to this young girl on the street just to make it look like they're like giving to the local community. And like the whole gag is then he's only got $100 in his wallet, so he's kind of talked into giving her that. But then because it's $100, he then tries to get it back off her, and he says, "Look, there's a camera there. We're filming for a show, and I need that $100 back. But what I'll do is I'll go and get change for you, and I'll buy, because they're selling like, I think it's like Pepsi or Coke, some sort of soda, and they're doing that to obviously like try and make ends meet. So he says, if you give me the 100 back, I'll get change and I'll go and buy $20 worth, he says, of the Pepsi. And then that becomes a whole thing where he eventually talks them into giving him the money back. And then there's all these like comedy of errors where he's trying to get like change out of a machine in a store, and then there's a whole thing where the machine's playing up. But the curse part comes in because the girl threatens to curse him if he like takes the money back, and that just like it's a real farce, but it plays into like the paranoia of the whole thing. And I guess maybe this idea of like local legends, that with it being Mexican, like could there be something to that? So that's the setup for the first episode, and it's very good. It's very well directed. It feels very authentic. It really taps into some modern like anxieties, and as I said, it does a great send up of like people who are like trying way too hard to be liberal and like PC, and just captures the mood of a lot of these types of characters. You've got very natural performances. The two leads have very good chemistry, like you really believe they are like a newly married couple. Emma Stone is like really impressive, and I think the reason is because she disappears into like the role completely. Like it really consumes her, and she managed to play a more quirky, offbeat version of herself where she's at times very paranoid and like, I don't know, like bemused and unsure how to act. And she's the one out of the two, I think, who is trying to present a more clean PC image, and she's kind of stumbling over herself doing that. Whereas Asher is maybe the more like brittle, nasty one. But there's just like a different air of like awkwardness to him. I think because he's probably the lesser actor of the two, that sort of works well for their dynamic and their chemistry, because he is the one who, I think he just feels like a more stilted like Jerry Seinfeld, where he doesn't have that smoothness, but he's constantly the butt of the joke, and that's the kind of vibe. So it has a very low-key indie sort of vibe. It has a very, like, it is in many ways classic mockumentary, like Curb Your Enthusiasm feel, or even like the Larry Sanders Show, but it works as well as it does because it's managed. It sort of has this bizarre sci-fi kind of air to, like the way the scenes play out, and we get like tracking shots, and we always feel like we're at a distance of the characters. It, like, even when they're being interviewed, which you would think would be a very intimate like scene, like the camera is like far back and looking at them through a lens, almost like through the windows. Or at one point, like the scene where Asher is told to give the girl like the money, the camera is sort of at a distance still, like following and shooting him through the side of the car, and that works because of the sense of paranoia of the show, and because of this idea of, are they being cursed? And the drama of it works so well, I think, because from the moment he makes this blunder, that being Asher, in this interview, it's almost like they're constantly tripping up over themselves to try and fix it. And the more they fix it, the deeper they get in, and the worse things get. And that's almost like a comedy, like classic comedy sort of premise. But it does lead to a lot of tension, because even though they're not the most likable of characters, you do get into what they're doing and their situation, and because you're given this setup of they've got to try and fix this problem, but then them desperately trying to fix it leads to more issues, then it immediately gets you into like the tension of the situation, and what a bizarre kind of story this is. There's all sorts of like weird, quirky stuff. As I said, when he's trying to get money from the machine, there's stuff with that where he can't seem to get the machine to work. And then there's another classic kind of like comedy premise where one of the locals says, I can do it, there's a trick to working the machine, but he wants him to give him the code to do it. And Asher's trying to say, well, just tell me and then I'll do it. And he's like, no, it's tough. I'll do it, but just give me the code. And eventually he does, but he's like being really paranoid and the local wants to take his money. And then when he's gone, the kids are gone anyway. And there's a nice payoff to that scene later on, because eventually Emma Stone's character finds out about it because they're being played the footage back. And she's been off doing something else, so this is the first she's heard of it. And that's when she insists on him going back and finding the girl and giving the money. And as it turns out, like, he goes looking around, and that scene is also really tense because of the way it's filmed. And in the end, he just gives the money to like this other girl who was like in the same group. Like, he finds their tent because they're like very poor, and he gives her the money. So he later lies to Whitney because he says, yeah, she came to the door and she was really happy and she told me the curse is off. And so he's telling a white lie there, which is going to like come back to bite him, you would think. But then there's a shot of someone watching them through the keyhole, which is really like sort of spooky. And there's just all these antics with like Benny Safdie's character trying, because the very opening scene is like them doing an interview with like this mother who's dying of terminal cancer and her son, and they're doing that whole like forced thing on the air where they're offering the son a job and they're trying to play it as, well, isn't this great news, this will really spur your spirits on. And that's when the Benny Safdie character is like trying to force her to like show emotion on air to like create this perfect moment, and he's trying to force water on her to try and make it look like she's crying. And the other two are like, well, what's going on here? And there's this sense of, especially Emma Stone's character, that she's not comfortable with a lot of these tactics. But as the drama goes on, I think it definitely comes across like it's partly then she's just being very PC. It's not that she like legitimately thinks then this is wrong, or it's almost like she's a villain, but in a different sort of way. Than she is very, I think, out of the two, very media sort of savvy about how this stuff looks. But there's a bunch of like weird encounters, like sexual encounters. So at one point they go to see Whitney's parents, and they're the parents who obviously got this bad reputation around town. And Asher has this really awkward exchange with the father, who starts commenting on the size of his penis, and it's because Whitney has said that they're not trying for children at the moment, or has maybe implied that they're not having sex very often. And it's this whole exchange, which is a very bad taste moment of like him just peeing on his tomatoes and talking about like small genitalia. And that scene was a little bit like maybe a bit too cringe for me, but that leads to more friction between them and a very like weird sort of bizarre sex moment. So as I said, it's a very very strong episode, like really well directed, and yeah, it's sort of painfully funny at times. It definitely gets that balance of being like really dramatic, and bits of it are quite tense, but also having this really bizarre twist on like the mockumentary style, and like actually being very funny, but you also follow these characters. I guess it remains to be seen how long you can like pull up with these characters, like how long they can engross you, whether that can like sustain over a whole series, or also a small complaint is then maybe Benny Safdie casting himself is a little bit on the nose. I think that's just going for this is very authentic because this is what I do. And also Gary Fielden. I know he has worked with the Safdie brothers, so it's almost like putting him in as one of the leads, and then him also being like a co-creator, and then Benny Safdie being a co-creator, and also playing the sleazy producer. I think it just feels like that's a little old hat doing that at this point, and maybe some of this mockumentary style stuff is a little bit old hat, but I think at the end of the day they do find a fresh angle, and there is something truly bizarre in this. And I think what makes it work is like the leads, really. The leads have great chemistry, and it's that great balance of they're pretty disgusting people at times, but they're also very compelling to watch. So you still want to watch them. So yeah, good stuff. First episode, really strong stuff, I would say. The Curse. So that's Land of Enchantment, episode 1. I'm very intrigued to see where this goes. So these are being released weekly on, well, Paramount Plus / Showtime, and being produced for A24 as well. So 1 episode a week. It's up now. If you've seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and I will be back next week about this time with a review of episode 2. Another new show I'm going to be trying, another new streaming show, is A Murder at the End of the World, the new Brit Marlin show. So that also has its first episode this week. Look out for my review of that coming soon. Probably the first 2, because I think they're putting the first 2 up this week. So look out for that, and more new TV reviews coming soon on the channel. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon.